9 more signs you're a good driver. Remember the video I made 3 years ago when I said I'd make a sequel talking about more good driving skills? Yeah, I really gotta stop promising follow-up videos. Anyways, here it finally is. Moving aside for emergency vehicles. Sirens. They mean something. Move out of the way, or at the very least try to make extra space so they can get by. I know that on a single lane road it can be hard, since I don't expect you to shove your whole car into the grass or off the side of a cliff, but hopefully the people in the oncoming lane realize that it's their responsibility to stop too, since the ambulance will likely need even more space, again in these super tight-knit roads, and to properly weave by both of you. Now, one of the most annoying things that I see, however, is when people at intersections who are in the oncoming lane decide, oh, that emergency vehicle isn't headed my way, so I can still keep driving like nothing, everything's totally normal. You don't know that. An emergency vehicle at any moment can make a turn or even drive over a median if it means saving a life as soon as possible. The only time where most states say it's legally okay to keep driving while in oncoming traffic is if you're on a divided highway where it's physically impossible for the emergency vehicle to suddenly cross over into your side of the highway and do a U-turn. Otherwise, in local roads, intersections, or smaller country highways, if there's no divider, you should always yield to them no matter where you are. As long as they're within proximity of you, again, you don't know what they're gonna do, so just yield to them. And since this is an extension of the first entry, you should also yield for buses, especially if they have their stop sign out. Never assume children will only cross from the door side only, so usually that's the right side. Some of them do actually walk in front of the bus and go around the other way. In fact, I think they're encouraged to, like I think it teaches them to go in front of the bus if they have to walk across the street instead of behind it. Unfortunately, we'll still, look, I'll just tell you guys a story. So when my brother first moved to Atlanta, one of the first things he saw when he was on a commute was an Altima aggressively changing lanes and attempting to pass the bus on the left. So because the Altima's coming from behind, it doesn't see the kid who's walking in the front of the bus currently, and unfortunately, it slammed into the poor child. The worst part was the Altima kept going. It was a hit and run. Hit and runs like this happen all over the country, and unfortunately, some of these children end up paralyzed even. It's just tragic, alright? Thankfully, every bus in my county does have a camera attached, so they can ticket her or hopefully even give her a court date and maybe even arrest her. But look, legal justice won't change the fact that some of these kids won't walk again, so it's still unfortunate. Look, I said it in my other video, so I'm gonna say it again. Cars are multi-thousand-pound objects, and the moment you get any speed going in them, they can easily obliterate a full-grown human, much less a small child. Never be in such a rush where you feel the need to ignore stop signs or emergency vehicles, which now links into the next entry. You should always plan your drives before you even get in a car. One of the most impactful habits you can develop that will make you a better driver is to just always plan your drives or get a general idea of where you're going. Whether it's a trip across the country or even just during your morning commute, knowing where you're going to stop, whether it's a scenic mountain or just a coffee shop that you visit every morning, it's a good way to code your brain to never be in a rush. By planning, I don't mean you have to bust out a notebook every single morning and write it down every single time you do these drives. What I mean is, like, for your daily commutes, just build a routine. Like, get a good schedule going, get good sleep, and don't keep ignoring alarms to the point you're past your 4th snooze. If you're under the weather from a crazy weekend, call off work if you can. Like, make plans ahead of time that will keep you away from driving a car in a less than stellar attitude. Another good driving habit is to never be in a rush. A video that changed my life that I started sharing to my friends and colleagues is one about how speeding mathematically isn't as effective as you would think, so it's really not that useful. Basically, even though if you start going 70, which is almost twice as fast as like 35 or 40, it won't matter if you both end up at the same stoplight. You've effectively gone the same speed as that person who was going 40, which was the speed limit of that area, despite you going 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, but you're still at the same stoplight. Especially if you're in tightly packed cities where there are stoplights every block, so if you're constantly doing 0 to 60 pulls, you're usually still going to end up at the next stoplight at the exact same time someone else does. Especially if this city also has bumper to bumper traffic on their highways. Again, you're all going nowhere and you're all eventually going to make it somewhere, so you should just wait your turn in line. It's super boring and it's super frustrating. I'm not going to say that like I enjoy it, but if I'm going to be bored in traffic and move super slow, I may as well do it safely as well, because trying to weave through traffic, there are plenty of studies that show that it isn't as fast as you would think, and it drastically shoots up your stress levels, which drastically shoots down your ability to react accordingly. Now, I'm not going to be some boring Karen who says blah 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 speeding is bad, never do it. You can drive spiritedly, and you should do it on empty roads where you have good visibility and you can see any potential hazards or any cops that are hiding. Speaking of driving faster and moving faster than most traffic, if you're going to be one of those people who wants to drive more spiritedly, it's important that you develop good lane intuition. Knowing which lane is the faster lane at a glance is a very impressive skill to develop and will reduce your stress greatly. Once you develop the skill, it just sticks with you for the rest of your life. Something I still see very often in big cities are these balmungs who constantly change lanes every 3 seconds, zooming around and aggressively cutting others off. And the moment they see one lane move even an inch faster than the other, they quickly just cut into it, only to realize that lane was actually the slower lane, and then they quickly just cut back over into the lane they originally were in, just constantly aggressively swapping lanes. And the worst part is this causes a traffic shockwave because it makes everyone behind them panic brake, because obviously they're trying to dodge this just weaving in front of them a few inches even. Oh, and did you know YouTube now censors this word in auto captions? So I can't really say it anymore, since any word that is deemed inappropriate will result in YouTube suppressing my content. Yeah, this censorship is starting to get out of hand here, but I decided to just revert to using random Norse words like balmung instead, since there is no way that something like that ever gets censored. It has a good ring to it too, doesn't it? It's got a little bit of venom behind it. I know it's a cool sword, and I'm really sorry for like the 3 Balmung fans who are sad to see me use it in place of stupid people, but come on, calling someone a Balmung for being dumb, that just somehow sounds so appropriate. And again, it's like I gotta work within these annoying boundaries that are being placed on us here in this platform. So anyways, if you are enjoying this video so far, please support me by subscribing and liking this video and sharing it to your friends. Okay, so back on topic. So how do you develop good lane intuition? The first is basic math. If I show you a lane with 7 cars and 3 cars in the other one, it's more likely that the less congested lane will move faster. This isn't always true, since maybe the grandma is in front of the lane of 3, so she'll just end up going super slow and holding up that entire lane. But the reality of life is that everything's a little luck based. You can't guarantee everything to a T, but generally speaking, you can make as best as possible of estimates to predict it. So 90% of the time, the lane with less cars moves faster. Shocker, right? But you'd be surprised how many people just don't count. Another really important factor to consider is what vehicles are filling a lane. If 3 trucks are in one lane but 7 cars are in the other, in that instance I would pick the 7, since cars are able to get up to speed much faster than large semi-trucks are. This also will vary based on the kind of truck, whether it's a rental truck, a moving truck, a trailer, a truck towing a boat, or RVs. A lot of them actually drive different speeds. For example, a lot of work trucks carrying gravel and dirt and heavy industrial loads will go the absolute slowest. Like these mover trucks where you rent to drive them, so not like moving companies. I'm talking about like U-Hauls and Penske's. These people drive notoriously slow, and this is because they aren't locals. They're obviously picking up their entire life and moving to a new city, and that's a pretty stressful situation, so I understand why they're being extra careful, and sometimes they don't even go the speed limit, they even go under them. With that knowledge in mind, you now know that they're one of these people that you should immediately weave around or move out of lane for, because they're going to be insanely slow. Like almost 100% accuracy on this one. Each time I see a Penske or U-Haul, I get out of that lane because I immediately assume that lane's going to be slower, and it actually is. One of the best showcases of good driving skill is actually one of the simplest, which is just parking first try. You would think parking a car would be the easiest part about driving, since you're bringing a car down to a standstill. But there are people who go through multiple decades of their life, but they still can't park competently. Admit it, we all have that one friend who does a 5-point turn, holds up everyone from leaving the parking lot just to still not park between the lines. For me, once I know the size of my vehicle, I never forget it. I only ever have to re-correct myself in the first month of owning a new vehicle, because after that, boom, one shot, one kill. I literally just never forget how big my vehicle is and always park it perfectly. I know there's gonna be some again, this video will show who's a bad driver and good driver in the comments, because bad drivers love self-reporting themselves, because did you know bad drivers actually think they're good drivers, so they'll defend their bad habits. But there are gonna be some bad drivers who are gonna cope and sieve by saying things like, what if one day you scrape your wheel, or maybe you actually don't know the size of your vehicle as well as you thought you did. That's why I'm extra cautious and why I still have to do those 5-point turns and blah 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 blah, because I don't want to hit something like you. Nope, never happened to me, never will. Very confident. I've owned both my cars over 5 years and never once had to worry about hitting anything while parking them. Once you know the size of them, and again, if you're a good driver, this makes sense to you, you will never ever ever mistakenly park them. Whether it's parallel parking, whether it's reversing them into a parking spot, whether it's pulling into a parking spot. It may take a bit to develop, but once you develop the skill and remember it for each specific car you own, you'll just know. Like, even if you own 2 cars simultaneously, like one's an SUV and one's a small coupe, you'll still know which one you're currently in and the size of the vehicle. Like, here's a good analogy for why you don't ever make mistakes after you learn the size of your vehicle. Are you ever worried that when you go to reach something, your arm only goes halfway through and you don't even come close to picking up that item? No, that for any non-physically impaired human, that's just not something that happens. Even me, who now has a bionic shoulder after recovering from a horrible injury because someone rear-ended me, I still will correctly reach for items perfectly. There's never ever a moment where I look at something, reach my arm out, and fail to grab that item. My brain, my coordination, and my nervous system just always knows the size of my arm and always knows how far that object is and always picks it up. If the object is too far, I don't attempt to reach it until I walk closer to it. Same thing, if the object is too close, then I just don't reach as far. We don't narrate those computations when we do those actions. We just do those actions. That is the best analogy I can think of when regarding knowing your vehicle's size. Once you know it, it is literally like an extension of your body and you never forget it. Proper traffic light etiquette. So I covered a different version of this phenomenon in my original video. I only mentioned leaving space regarding moving traffic, but I forgot to mention etiquette when actually at a traffic light. Have you ever seen the people who leave 2, even 3 cars of gap in traffic? So why is this such a bad thing? Well, because it can lead to traffic shockwaves, and in tight cities where intersections are super close together, this can also clog lanes and completely ruin traffic light cycles. For example, have you ever been driving in downtown and you need to do a right turn, but you can't get to the right turn lane because some doofus is blocking you from entering it? You can see that if they just pulled up their car more, they would have actually left a large enough gap behind them for you and other drivers to squeeze by and continue using the right lane. This can create a chain reaction and a whole bunch of traffic shockwaves. This issue stems from 2 driving habits that most people fail to master. The first one is the one above I already mentioned, which is that people just don't know the size of their vehicle. They just wing it each and every time, and they'll do this for decades. Like, it's shocking how many people get away with this, being horrible at parking and being horrible at stopping, because I guess stopping in traffic is in a sense another form of parking, because you're coming to a complete stop just like you do when you're parking. So instead of making fun of these people, I'm just going to give a very good tip for them to follow. This should leave about a car worth of space, and that is usually the golden standard when sitting in traffic, is somewhere within a car worth of space. Now, if you're in a taller vehicle like an SUV or truck, you actually want to pull up to where the bottom of the vehicle's tires are still visible to you. So the vehicle in front of you, just look at the bottom of their tires. For cars looking at motorcycles, use the tire rule and never pull up so close to where you can no longer see our taillight. You don't have to get it perfect every single time and get it exactly 1 car distance, but again, a little closer or a little farther than that, that's fine. The lesson here is to be efficient enough to not waste lane space where you're 2, 3, 4, even 5 cars away from someone. Regarding all vehicles, you always never want to cover their taillight. That means you have pulled up too close. And just like with the parking entry, once you learn the size of your own vehicle, and once you get used to this habit of just lining up with tires or bumpers, you never forget. You will do this just on autopilot for the rest of your life. Another very good skill is always knowing when the light will turn green. A lot of my colleagues and friends think I'm some sort of psychic because they're like, how do you always know when exactly to let off your brake and start rolling and whenever it turns green? And outside the United States, there are a lot of countries that actually just have green light timers or red light timers that will tell you how long a red light lasts or how long a green light lasts. But in the US, even though a lot of places don't have these timers, that's an understatement. Basically nowhere has these timers. There's a trick you can use. Pedestrian walk timers also work. So you can just look at the pedestrian walk timers to your left and right, and that'll tell you when they should be done walking. And when they're done walking, it usually will then let you start going forward, or it will be about to. So it's a good rule of, there's probably like a 3-second gap, but it's close enough where you won't be as antsy and you'll see which light is about to go green and you can react accordingly. You could also just look at cross traffic lights, and this is a skill I developed just riding a motorcycle because you have way more visibility without your A-pillars and cars. So you always know what cross traffic lights are, where if they're about to go red, yellow, then red, obviously you guys are about to receive the green. The most big brain thing though is when you can even control the light pattern to get a green whenever you want a green. And this is especially important if you're on an empty road that doesn't have cross traffic. Sometimes I see car guys get out of their cars and push the pedestrian walk button just to get a green light. Do not do this. In most states, it's illegal to leave a vehicle unattended on an active roadway. Instead, you should look for these lines on the ground. These lines are known as induction loops, and they are actually what sends information to the traffic light to let it know a vehicle is waiting on a green light. So to all the drivers who pull too far forward on the crosswalk or hang too far back and don't come close enough to these to trigger them, that is probably why you're constantly sitting at red lights for 2-3 minutes. Once you know that these induction loops exist, you will understand that you can manipulate them to always get a green light for you, so you don't have to get super impatient and wait forever at a red light. For motorcyclists, you guys are definitely rolling your eyes at this entry since you guys have known about these for all of time. Again, I know a lot of people in cars who actually don't know that these things exist on the road. They're like, oh wait, these things, these little metal wires on the road actually can determine a light pattern? I'm like, yeah. And then they've just been sitting at dead reds or unnecessarily long reds all their life, watching an intersection constantly blow by because they didn't realize that their car wasn't triggering a green. Because some intersections by default will eventually on a timer give a green to you, where it's like, it's been 3 minutes of these guys across traffic getting green. We're gonna give green to those guys now. But again, you'd be surprised how if you sit on these induction loops, it'll actually start the process pretty instantly. It's actually kind of cool. But yeah, for motorcyclists who somehow didn't know these, try sitting on these next time to hopefully avoid dead reds. If they still don't sense it, unfortunately your bike might just be too light. A trick you can do is to try to use the middle one instead, since that actually has better sensitivity most of the time because it's between all three of them, but sometimes it is what it is. So to close this video out, the final skill you should develop as a good driver is actually avoiding bad drivers. One of the greatest abilities to have as a good driver is the ability to spot bad drivers and anticipate their stupidity. That's just a more crude way of me describing defensive driving. If you've never taken a defensive driving course, I highly recommend it, as it gives you a discount on your auto insurance while also reprogramming your brain and instilling the cruel reality that most drivers on the road have the computational capacity similar to a light bulb hooked onto a potato. Most car accidents usually take 2 to tango. This means both parties need to make a mistake in order for a collision to occur. Even though you can't control other people's stupidity, at the very least, if you anticipate their stupidity and try your best to be as smart as possible, you will be less likely to be involved in accidents. Of course, there are some unavoidable situations in life that no matter how smart you are, the stupidity of other people around you is so overwhelmingly high that you get stuck in an accident anyways. That's just life, especially in big cities in America, where for some reason they refuse to make trains and remove all these brain dead Balmongs off the road because I swear to God, most of them don't even want to drive anyways. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you love automotive content, make sure to subscribe. If you had fun with this video, make sure to share it with friends, leave a like, and check out my other content if you haven't already. Other than that, see you all next time. Blade Angel out.